This is the Milo Beasley Show. This is the Milo Beasley Show. There's only one thing you need to know. This is the Milo Beasley Show. And now, here's your host, Milo Beasley.
And welcome to the Milo Beasley Show, episode number 355. I'm so excited for our guest today. I could give you an intro, but I really want to get into it. So please help me welcome at this time, Steve Anderson. How are you doing, sir?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing great, Milo. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
I'm so excited. I'm a huge fan of Meet the Robinsons, which you wrote, directed, even voiced. That's so I do want to talk about Meet the Robinsons, but I guess your resume just goes on and on from working on Bebe's Kids to Tarzan to directing Winnie the Pooh and of course all the Disney animated hits, working on the storyboard in the like last 10 years. I mean, do you ever just look back and go, holy crap, like I did that?
Yeah, it's very easy to sort of take it for granted because it's your day to day, and it's just been your job for all these years, and then there are those moments where you go, oh wow, I used to dream about that when I was a kid. I wanted to work at Disney so bad, work at Disney Animation specifically so bad, and wow, I got a chance to do that. I was there for 26 years and got to do a lot of different things, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people just dream about it once, but again, like you said, to do it for 26 years. And then, so how does one get involved? I actually had a friend of mine who attended Cal Arts with you. His name is Lauren. And he said to say hi. He was like, when I told him I have, he was like, oh my God, I went to Cal Arts with him.
What's his name?
His name is Lauren Javier.
Oh my gosh. Yes. I love Lauren. Of course. Yeah. He was in my wife's class and they were just 1 year behind me. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. So how does one, dream about, I mean, I have no artistic ability whatsoever, which is why I talk. I don't work with my hands. So how does one get involved in that industry, from just dreaming about being an animator to go into school and then getting that foot in the door to work for Disney?
Yeah. Well, for me, it was just draw. I mean, I watched lots of Disney movies, watched Wonderful World of Disney, lots of Looney Tunes, lots of Hanna-Barbera cartoons, any cartoons I could get my eyes on, just because I loved animation so much. And that just, for some reason, it just kind of flipped a switch in my head and it made me want to draw. It made me want to try to capture those characters on paper. So I just drew as much as I could. Initially starting out drawing other people's characters and then gradually creating my own characters and then getting more interested, kind of bigger picture in story stuff, screenwriting, just filmmaking in general, but still kind of in the animation space. And so when I hadn't heard about Cal Arts, because there wasn't an internet, so you really didn't, right. I didn't know where I was going to go to college. I was halfway through high school and I'm like, well, I want to do this animation thing, but there's no animation schools. What do I do? I guess I'll go to a fine art program somewhere. And then it just so happened that I saw an issue of this magazine called Disney News that was published back in the 70s and 80s. And they had an article about this school called Cal Arts. And there were all these pictures of people drawing and animating. And my brain just exploded because I thought, this is it. This is where I have to go. And my parents were very supportive. I applied. Very lucky that I got in. And so I hightailed it to California from Plano, Texas, and that was it.
So you said your parents were supportive, but when you were growing up and you're doing your doodles, were your parents like, you're never going to make a career out of this?
I think so. They never said that to me, and again, very supportive of that passion, but it was certainly, I grew up in a time where there really wasn't much of an industry. It was Disney. It was, Hanna-Barbera. Filmation was making their TV shows. Bluth, Bakshi, but not a ton of of work, and certainly not anything that would make it look like an attractive career, you know, living in Texas, not on the West Coast or the East Coast, where you might know a little bit more about it. So, my dad has said to me in retrospect, he said, when you said you wanted to go pursue animation, I thought you were gonna, be living in the basement for the rest of your life in our house with me and mom. But he said, I'm shocked you were able to get a career out of it. And again, very fortunately, Who Framed Roger Rabbit came out the summer right before my freshman year at CalArts. And then a year later was Little Mermaid. And then Tiny Toon Adventures, the TV show was going. And then, the industry sort of exploded. And then, so I was very lucky to have gotten in right at a great time where lots of work was happening.
That's fantastic. And then, so your first gig for Disney was Tarzan, correct? And what did you, were you a storyboard artist? Were you a filler artist? What did you do for Tarzan?
Yep, I was a storyboard artist on Tarzan. About 3 years on that show. Super proud of the movie. A great movie to be my first Disney experience.
Absolutely.
Prior to that, I had worked at a smaller studio doing lots of different things. I was an animator, and I directed some TV. And a nice thing about a smaller studio is sometimes you get to wear a lot of different hats. So I got to a nice kind of general education in all different arenas. And what was wonderful is that I met Kevin Lima, who was one of the directors of Tarzan at this smaller studio. He was actually developing a project there. And the other director of Tarzan was Chris Buck, who was my animation teacher at CalArts. So I was also very fortunate that I knew both of them. And when their project was starting up, we started talking about, hey, maybe I could come, work in story on that movie. And the stars aligned, and I got to do it. So
that's incredible. And you also got to work on one of my favorite movies of all time, which I think is finally starting to get its flowers, and that is Emperor's New Groove.
Yeah.
You had to know where I was going with that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's finally starting to get its flowers. So now that you start to see like this uptick in that movie that you worked on so long ago, are you like, well, it's about time? Because it's it's a great movie.
Thanks. Really proud of the movie, and it's such a quirky, unusual movie, and we knew it at the time, but when I see it now, if I ever see clips of it, or if I'm channel surfing or whatever, I happen to like catch some of it, I actually shake my head and go, that's a really weird movie, especially for Disney at that time. I can't believe we got away with some of those things. It's such a Looney Tunes cartoon in a weird way, not Disney.
Right.
So it's kind of mystifying that we were able to get away with doing it. But I'm thrilled that it's getting finally kind of getting noticed. It seems like people saw it back when it came out, but maybe just not enough to kind of make the studio believe in it.
Right.
But it's nice to know that it didn't go away. It just sort of maybe hibernated for a little bit.
Right.
And then people discovered it on whatever mediums, Disney Channel or home video, whatever.
Right.
And it is crazy, because I don't think I've ever met anybody who said, I don't really like that movie. It seems like there's a joke for everybody in that movie.
I swear, I promise you, I quote it once at least once a week, some random quote. And I feel like the magic number for some of these movies is somewhere between that 10 and 15 year mark.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, 2022, is that 15-year mark for Meet the Robinsons.
Yeah.
And I see new merch coming out for it from Disney. I feel like that is the next, I don't want to call it retro because it's been 15 years, but I think it's that next one that people, because I hadn't watched it for a long time. And I'm going to be honest, like I just hadn't watched it. It just went, and then a couple months ago, I sat down and I watched it. I was just flipping on Disney Plus, and I was like, oh man, I haven't watched Meet the Robinsons. And I watched it. I was like, gosh, like this movie was like, how has it not been in my regular rotation?
So that
And
thanks.
so yeah, now we're coming up on 15 years. Does it seem like it's been 15 years? Um,
It depends on the day, I guess.
right.
Sometimes you think, wow, that was a long time ago, and it feels like a long time ago, and then you talk with colleagues or about stories, or you say, "I remember that time we did this on Meet the Robinsons," and it feels like yesterday. Or I look at photos or memorabilia, or going through old boxes or something, and yeah, it is kind of hard to believe that it's been 15 years.
And that's just since release. I
Yeah,
mean, it
yeah.
obviously, animated movies, and computer animated movies, and don't just happen overnight. So how many years had you been working on that from the time that you got the script, the initial, storyboards to the time that it was released?
It was about 4.5 years ish. Which, you know, as you said, animated movies take a long time. 3 to 5 years is a pretty average time period for animation. Um, that said, it a lot happened in those 4.5 years, both studio wise, leadership at the studio wise,
Right.
creatively on the film as it evolved. Um, so yeah, it was a packed 4.5 years, but really, I mean, a really special movie for me. And the team that we had making the movie, I just am forever grateful for their passion and their dedication to sticking with it, because it was a movie that went through a lot of iteration, buffeted by a lot of storms,
Right.
and they were so supportive, and they were right there with me. I always felt that great support from that team. So really special.
Now, how did you end up voicing Bowler Hat? I mean, you voiced a couple characters, Bud, Tallulah, but Bowler Hat guy, and I noticed while looking at the IMDb that a lot of the voices for the movies were other storyboard artists for other movies, were artists for, so it didn't seem like it was a movie full of actors per se. That it kind
Right.
of was, like you said, almost like a team effort for it to come through.
Yeah. Yeah, and as you know, that this has been known to happen from time to time. Like Brad Bird was the voice of Edna Mode in The Incredibles, and Chris Sanders was the voice of Stitch and Lilo and Stitch, and that happens because we as we make the movies, we storyboard them, and we put them on film, and we sort of workshop them in a very work in progress way, which means we add temp music, temp sound effects, and also temp voices. And we do all the temp voices ourselves. We all just run down to the recording studio and blah 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 into a microphone, and then it's just a placeholder.
Right.
But sometimes those voices kind of stick with the characters, um, and I didn't expect that to happen, but I was very honored that the studio said, "Hey, we'd like you to do it." We did start exploring casting ideas, but they said they'd like me to do it, and it was an interesting movie as far as casting goes, because there's a lot of characters with not huge parts. I mean, they
Right.
have like, let's say the Robinson family, for example, they're in it and they have an impact. They make an impression. But if you counted the lines for each family member, you know, it might just be a couple pages of script if you gather them all together on one document. And so, you know, it wouldn't be a part that's big enough for a name actor to come in and do, because they would want something bigger than that. So it was very unique that way, and I think that's why we ended up sticking with a lot of our temp voices, because they worked. People, it told the story. They all did a great job with it, and it sort of helped with that issue. And the two main characters were kids,
Right.
so you're not going to go cast Tom Cruise and and whoever as the two leads, because we had these great kids that were doing the voices. So it was kind of a unique challenge casting wise, and that's kind of why we stuck with a lot of the temp voices.
Now with animation, a lot of times it's table reads, or you're recording around, doing a group setting. But with Bowler Hat guy, he's often talking to himself. So were you just in a room by yourself recording?
Yeah. Strangely enough, animation, at least at Disney, we do record. We tend to record separately, solo records. Every now and then we'll bring in an actor to read it, with another actor if the schedules allow it, but oftentimes their schedules just don't line up. So yeah, it was me in the room. I relied very heavily in that sense on my friend, and at the time he was the head of story on the film, Don Hall. He's since gone on to be an Academy Award winner for Big Hero 6 and has the movie Strange World coming out in a couple months. He was story supervisor and a really good friend of mine. So I kind of let him direct me because I lose all objectivity once I'm so I'm in there just, and it was exhausting because there was a lot of screaming and like veins bulging and that kind of thing. So I had to, he was very helpful in kind of saying, pull it back or push it further or, try this, try that. So I really relied on him a lot for that.
That's fantastic. And I'm assuming you have a photo with the Disney meet and greet character of the bowler hat guy, correct?
Yeah, I do. And in fact, we're taking a trip to Walt Disney World in a couple days, and he appears in the Halloween parade.
It's 20 miles that way.
Oh, really? Are you down there?
I am in Orlando. Yes, and actually, I just got back from D23 yesterday. So, jet setter all over the Disney World. Disney World. Yes, but yeah. So,
and as you know, Bowler Hat Guy is still appearing in the Boo to You parade. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in a couple days.
That's fantastic. I hope you get a good view with him. Now, do you have a lot of Meet the Robinsons merchandise? Do you have like a shrine room where you put memorabilia and things like that?
Some things. I have things kind of here and there. Most of what I have are lots of drawings, lots of Xeroxes of things, lots of just stuff that you kind of collect over the course of making a movie. Nothing that I'm not supposed to have, I promise, Disney archives. But yeah, and we were able to get some of they had a fair amount of Disney store merchandise at the time, so we were able to get some of that, and yeah, little things here and there.
That's great. And as you said, things that maybe you're not supposed to, not things you're not supposed to have. And of course you did, storyboard work on a lot of, big movies, with Frozen, Big Hero 6, Zootopia. Did the archives, did the studio allow you to keep any, original pieces from that? From those works?
For the storyboards that I did, I just have Xeroxes that I would make. When we were drawing on paper, all the paper got boxed up and carted off to the animation research library. Now everything's digital, so they just sort of migrate the files.
Right.
But they're good with letting people take work just for future reference and for portfolios and things like that. So
that's fantastic. Now you said you worked with Don Hall, and then so is that how you ended up working on Winnie the Pooh right after Meet the Robinsons?
Yeah. So when Don left Meet the Robinsons, he went and was the story supervisor on Princess and the Frog as I was finishing up Robinsons, and then went back into development on new projects. And then Don was done with Princess and the Frog. Our boss at the time, John Lasseter, had pulled him in and said, "Hey, we got this Winnie the Pooh project." And then he pulled me in and said, "Would you like to work with Don together and do this?" And absolutely. I mean, chance to work with Don as a director was great. Also, just to revive Winnie the Pooh was kind of an exciting challenge. What we didn't really think about at the time, but what we found great is that we're so used to at Disney feature animation. You're so used to starting with a blank page and creating everything from scratch. I mean, maybe you're adapting a book or something, but still, you're building everything from square one. But Winnie the Pooh was like, oh wait, the world's created, the character, we know the cast, we know how they talk. Like we know what their dynamic is. We can all just start drawing. We just gathered a story team together and we just started brainstorming, throwing ideas out. People were sketching, pinning stuff up. And we kind of built the movie that way, kind of more the old fashioned, you know, the old days at Disney, just sketching and brainstorming, which was really cool. So that gave it a really different feel.
Now, did you? I mean, but you obviously had to have limitations with Winnie the Pooh, where you have an open sandbox with Meet the Robinsons. You know, you're open world. But Winnie the Pooh, you kind of have to reel him in. This would not be something he would do. This would not be something Tigger would do. You know,
Exactly.
so was that difficult, or was it more you already kind of had something in mind? So it was an easier path since you couldn't have an open sandbox.
Right. What was interesting, what was easy about it is that it made it very clear when we were going off the path. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
as soon as you make a joke that might be a little too broad or too cartoony or too knowing, like a little too contemporary, let's say, it's obvious. So you know when you got to go, oh, that's not the right thing. At the same time, you know, we had the question of how do we not ruin what makes Winnie the Pooh great, which is the charm and the heart and just the sweetness of it. How do we maintain that, but not make it feel like it was made, you know, 50 years ago?
How do you make it fresh?
Yeah. So we were always kind of trying to say, how far can we push? How can we, the timing and the pacing of the movie was one thing. It's funny because we just kept trimming and editing and trying to like tighten the pace to make it just not feel super fast, but just a little bit faster. And I remember towards the end of making the movie, we ended up watching, I think we were getting DVD extras together. So we were looking at deleted scenes of some of our really old reels from a couple years earlier. And we were like, oh my gosh, this thing is moving like a snail. We were shocked at how slow we actually had made it up front and how much more we quickened the pace over the course of the years. So, yeah, it was an issue of like dialing things as opposed to making huge sweeping, you know, big changes to the material. It was like, we'll just goose that a little bit and we'll just bring that down a little bit. You know, it's like finding like on a mixing board or something, you know, you're finding all the right levels for things.
And one thing that Disney is so good at, whether on Imagineering side, storyboard side, you know, making movies, is the research that goes into it. You know, like when they're making Zootopia, you're looking at animals and trying to mimic that. Can you tell me a little bit about the background on Winnie the Pooh and going to see, you know, A.A. Milne's, work and, you know, home and stuff like that?
Yeah, we were shocked to learn that there is really a 100-acre wood. Like there is a place that I think we all just assumed that Milne, you know, maybe based it on some locations in his and Christopher Robin Milne's travels and experiences. But the fact that there really was a place where all those Winnie the Pooh locations had a connection to, we were kind of like, oh, because we didn't think we'd be able to take a research trip for Winnie the Pooh. Like the research trip would be going down the street to the ARL, the Animation Research Library, and pulling old artwork and stuff like that. That would be the research. So when we found that out, we're like, yeah, let's go. So we took a tour of the 100-acre wood. There's this amazing Pooh historian that we found there. He walked us all around what's called Ashdown Forest in Sussex. We got to take a walk around A.A. Milne's. It's sort of like his vacation home that was it's in the 100-acre wood property. We went to the Victorian Albert Museum, and they have a collection of Ernest Shepard, who did the illustrations for the original Pooh books. They have a collection of his drawings in one of their special rooms, and they allowed us to put the gloves on and go in and, you know, take a look at his pen and ink drawings. Wow. So there's some really neat things that just put us in that frame of mind, you know.
That's incredible to be able to go and do again, like they do such a great job at doing the research, so things you feel that emotional connection when watching.
Yeah.
I have to ask about working on Monsters at Work,
Mhm.
mainly because in the middle of it, a little thing called COVID-19 happened. How how was it working during work stoppages, quarantines, working from home, not being able to physically see the people that you're working with? How tough was that? By the way, I love Monsters at Work.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Absolutely loved it. But yeah, I have to know, like, how was it working on a project like that, but during that time?
Yeah, it was weird, as I think everybody, there was that moment of like, is this really happening? And it just in life and in our culture and the
Right.
world, it's like, what is going on? And this is so unusual, and we have no frame of reference for these things, for this thing that's happening. And it was a little bumpy, as you can imagine. For me, all I really need for my job was a laptop and my iPad. So, but there were other people that needed specific kind of software to do their jobs and specific kind of technology, like tech that the studio had to provide. But I have to say, once all that stuff settled, everybody just kind of kept working. uh, what was good about when it happened to us in the process was we had already pretty much finished with storyboarding and writing.
Okay.
So and those are really the time. Those are the stages that you really want to be in the room together. As you're brainstorming and building stuff like that. Thankfully, we were almost done with that, and we were just starting episode production. And we had a vendor studio which was up in Vancouver named Icon, and we were already going to be video conferencing with them, even if we
Oh,
were
okay.
still in the building because they're in Vancouver. So in a weird way, it kind of just sort of smoothly fell in place. So we were very fortunate. I, th- I have yet to do any kind of story brainstorming, story writing, the kind of group think that you do in those stages. I've yet to do that over Zoom. I can imagine how tough it must be.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. Now, as we are talking about, storyboarding and standing up in front of a room and showing your work, have you ever thought, man, this is what Walt did?
Mm, yeah. Uh, I'll be as quick with this anecdote as possible, but I grew up looking at a lot of those kind of big coffee table books about Disney and art books and stuff like that, and all those pictures of, initially I wanted to be an animator, so I saw the pictures of the story rooms with the people pitching on with all the drawings pinned up. But I kind of looked past that at the time when I was younger because I wanted to be an animator. But then cut to years later, I'm a storyboard artist, which I love more than animating. So happy that I found that rather than animating. And I remember on Emperor's New Groove, myself and my friend Don Hall, who we talked about earlier, we were storyboarding the big action climax of the movie. And Don had the stuff inside the palace where Pacha and Cusco were trying all the different vials of stuff to turn him back. And I had all the stuff on the outside of the palace where they're running around trying to, the vials falling off the
Off
ledge and that kind of
right
thing.
off the nose, yeah.
Uzma Kitty, all that kind of stuff. And we had a pitch once, and then again, it was the old school boards and pins and paper. And we were going to be pitching to the director, and we hung all of our boards up, and it was huge. And it filled the entire story room in a big circle. And just there was a moment right before the director came in, I was like, wow, I really feel like a story artist. And this feels like those moments in those books, those pictures where you see all the guys, with their pitch sticks and their pitching. And it was kind of one of those pinch me moments. It was really neat.
That's an incredible feeling,
Yeah.
and to do it at the studio and for the company that you grew up, watching and stuff. And I want to roll into that.
Mhm.
I want to talk about your project, Disney in between. Uh,
Yes.
That's yeah. So tell me a little bit about this. So it's the lost decades, right? The 70s, and it's based on the 70s and 80s. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, I've always been fascinated with the kind of the post-Walt, pre-Eisner Katzenberg days. Number one, that was that was my childhood Disney, so I grew up with that, and so I kind of have an affinity for that. But also, learning that it was an interesting time for the studio, and they really struggled with having lost their leader in '66 when Walt passed away, and then wrestling with their image as the rest of the world was changing and Hollywood was changing and movie making was changing, and Disney was they were afraid to change what Disney was, but in doing so they put themselves at the back of the line because the rest of Hollywood was changing. So I've always found that really fascinating, a really interesting story. I'd heard some of the stories, but really I just wanted to know, wow, what happened? And I was fortunate to have access to so many of the people, particularly in animation, that worked there during that time, because now I was working with them. So I thought, well, I'm just going to start talking with people and see where this goes. And was it going to be a documentary? Is it going to be a book? I chose a book so I could spend a little more time, get a little more thorough into some of the stories. But interviewed a bunch of the animation folk and was able to get in touch with a fair amount of live action folks as well. So the book is, about 66 to 86, those 20 years of the studio's history. And it talks about all those films and kind of all the ups and downs and struggles and victories and that happened during that time period. So in live action and animation in the studio.
That's incredible. I'm so excited for it. I
Cool.
promise you, I'm not just saying this because you're on the show and I'm talking to you, but I will be purchasing this book.
Awesome.
I'm super excited for it. And so we're looking at somewhere in 2023, correct?
Yeah, that's the hope. We're working on the manuscript right now, editing, and then we'll start figuring out the rest of the book. So
that's fantastic. Hopefully we'll get you at a D23 to do to talk about it.
Yeah, maybe so.
That'd be fantastic. And I know you're working at Atomic now, but with the with the way that Disney Plus is now and needing content, could you see yourself going back and perhaps working on projects that were canned, such as like the Tink meets Peter prequel, or projects that maybe you were going to maybe a Robinson sequel? Could you see yourself going back and working on these things that they clearly need content for?
Yeah, I think anything's possible. I mean, I left Disney last summer just to kind of explore new things, but I'm open to all kinds of stuff, and particularly the Robinson world. I love those characters, and we thought about so many different kinds of stories and where those characters would go, and so there's definitely ideas for how to continue them. So
Absolutely.
Tink meets Peter, I loved that. So we'll see what happens. I'm always open.
I think the world would love a Tink meets Peter prequel. I think that I just think that they don't know that they want it, but I think that, like, I didn't know that I wanted it before I read about it. Now, as we talk about animation, you actually have done some live action work as well, right? Some live action directing and writing, like some shorts. And do you see yourself maybe working in live action in the future, or are you like, what, I tried it, my heart is in animation?
I would love to explore more. I think what I'd love to do, as when the timing is right, is do some more live action shorts, just kind of play around in that world and learn more about it. When I made my live action short, 2015, I think is when we finished it. It was really just, I was in development at Disney, and things were going very slowly, which is fine. But I was really hungry to make something. I just wanted to make something. And I have a friend who produced my short, but he does a lot of live action independent stuff as well on his own. He does his own features and shorts, and he was like, I'll produce it if you want to do something. So we did it, and it was so much fun. I love doing it. Granted, it was very simple, one location, two characters, so I made it easy on myself so I didn't, but I would love to play around with more and learn more. It's a different way of telling stories, and that's really what I love doing. So,
Awesome.
yeah, I'd love to experiment more with that.
One thing we're going to go into now is a little mini game on here called the Milo Beasley Show Frequently Asked Questions. And I'm going to ask you the same 5 questions that I asked to all my guests.
Okay.
There's no wrong answers. Well, I guess could be, but I wouldn't know. All right. So you ready?
Yes.
All right. Question number 1. What was the first concert you ever attended?
Oh. This might be embarrassing. I'm proud of being a nerd for this band, but maybe people will laugh at me. But it was the Monkees. When the Monkees had their, I lived in Dallas at the time, and the Monkees had their big reunion tour, and so they came to Dallas in the '80s when they, I loved watching the reruns. So I was already a Monkees fan, but then when they did the big re-energizing the band in the '80s, they came through Dallas, so I went to see the Monkees.
That's fantastic. I'm the same. I mean, same type of, I guess nerdy premise. My and animal theme. My first concert was the Turtles. So,
yes, same generation there. Same, yeah.
Question number 2: do you believe in ghosts?
I believe in the possibility of all of that. I have yet to experience anything supernatural. My wife is really sensitive to that stuff, and she tends to feel it much more than I do. But I am totally open to all supernatural, paranormal. I love the idea that it's all out there. I think from just I'm not sensitive to it, and I'm not attracted. I don't attract it, let me say. So I have had no experience, but I am totally there.
All right. So in a twist on a common question, in a movie about your life, who would play your parents?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Wow. Holy smokes. It's not really a one-to-one comparison, but I remember as a kid watching Happy Days a lot, thinking that Tom Bosley as Mr. Cunningham it is totally different personality. I don't know what it was. There was something that just kind of evoked my dad from Tom Bosley. So I guess I'll say Tom Bosley. And my mom, this is really kind of a random pull, but there was a performer on Saturday Night Live back in the '80s named Mary Gross. You know of this person?
Yes.
She's a great, really funny performer. And there was something that kind of also back then made me think of my mom for some weird reason. Again, not one-to-one, not like a dead ringer, but there was something about Mary Gross. So I'll say Mary Gross and Tom Bosley.
Fantastic. Question number 4. Who is your favorite person to follow on social media?
Gosh. There's these 2 wonderful ladies that I follow. They're on social media. They're Ellie Olie, Elioli, but it's Elena and Olivia, and they are amazing artists. I actually met them back when Meet the Robinsons came out. They were still in high school, and they friended me on Facebook because they're really big Meet the Robinsons fans. They have since gone on to be huge players in the animation industry, incredible visual development artists, and they do all this really fun Robinson fan art every now and then too, which is just incredible. So I'm always really inspired seeing their work. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I encourage everyone to go find Ellie Olie. It's just Ellie Olie, Elioli, and check them out.
Fantastic. That's why I asked this question, because we may not be following these people, but you're like, hey, you need to go follow them. That's why I asked this question.
Yeah.
And then our last question, I'm super excited to hear your answer, because it could literally be all over the place. So in your time, either working on studio, in a studio, working on set, maybe you're just out and about, what has been your biggest fanboy moment where you saw a celebrity or somebody and you just fanboyed out, either went up to them and couldn't stop talking or was like, I, you know,
Right. Well, I'll lump two people together. Danny Elfman was lovely enough to do our score on Meet the Robinsons, and I've been a fan of Danny's Oingo Boingo scores, his film scores, everything. So to get to work with him was like, I can't even compute this. This is crazy. I don't think I fanboyed too much. I think I held it together.
okay.
But it was pretty. And I would say at least once a week. Once he was actually into composing the cues for the movie, we would go to his house. We went to his house. And we would go into his home studio, and he would play us his demos of the score. And it was like, this is not real. And then the other one, I'll just add one more if I can, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So on Winnie the Pooh, we got the amazing John Cleese from Monty Python to come do the narrator, the voiceover narrator on Winnie the Pooh. And we went over to London to record him. And as we were prepping for the recording session, I was kind of just trying to punch up some of the dialogue that we'd written. And I was like, John Cleese is going to be saying our dialogue. He's Don, and these dialogue that Don and I wrote, this voiceover stuff, he's going to be speaking it. The pressure was immense. And luckily he was absolutely lovely. He laughed at everything we had. We showed him a bunch of clips from the movie. He was wonderful. And so willing to do anything that we asked him to do, and just, hit it out of the park. But that was, John Cleese to me is sort of a legend in terms of his writing, his performing, just his storytelling. Another one that I feel that I've been so influenced by. So to get to work with him and get to actually hear our words coming out of his mouth was pretty amazing.
Gosh, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, it was neat.
So I have to ask again, I have a 2-year-old son, and the movie that he loves the most is Frozen. And so anytime if he starts having a 2-year-old, breakdown as they do, we put on Frozen. So you did the voice of Kai, and
right.
And so is that another temporary, storyboard voice that they're like, oh, that works. Let's, you're now doing that.
Pretty much. They just called me down and said, would you do this? We call it scratch. Would you do the scratch for this character? So I was like, sure. I do that a lot for different movies. Happy to do it. And then because I was already in SAG from previous voiceover work, it was easy for them to just say, all right, you're the voice. So yeah.
Could you see yourself getting more into voice acting? Would you want to keep doing that, or if the situation presented itself?
I've thought about that. I think it would be fun. At the same time, I feel very much like I was really fortunate to get the opportunities that I got to do the voices that I got to do. However, I feel like I don't really have a craft at that. I sort of kind of do it.
Right.
I'm very much an amateur.
Steve. Steve.
So I kind of feel like I should leave that up to the people that are the real professionals at that one. But who knows? We'll see. I answered an Instagram ad, if you will, from a CalArts student a couple months ago for their student film. They were looking for a voice of an older guy, and I was like, oh, I could do that, and I did it. They hired me to do it, so I went up to CalArts and did the voice. That was fun. So it's fun to do it every now and then, but maybe for lower stakes than a real profession.
Speaking of Instagram, I'm a huge fan of your Instagram and all your art on there. For folks who love Disney characters, love Disney art, I love seeing your stuff on there. So where can folks, they want to find you, where can folks find you on the social medias?
So my Instagram is at Steve Hat Guy, all one word. So like bowler hat guy, but Steve instead of bowler. And then my website is the same thing, stevehatguy.com. And that's just got storyboards. Well, both have storyboards, doodles, silly stuff, just cartoons, fun stuff to do that I do. So
Yeah,
thanks.
I absolutely love it. I think your most recent was Madam Mim
Yeah.
on that, which I got to see at Oogie Boogie Bash. They have they had the Madam Mim character out, which was she did a great job. It was
I
fantastic.
saw people's video or stories about that. That's the first time they've done it. I
Yeah.
don't feel like I've ever seen her before.
No,
I mean,
she's brand new for this year.
that's
They have
amazing.
her, Sid from Toy Story, which they had out last year, Ernesto de la Cruz
Oh yeah,
from Coco.
that mask is so cool.
It was so cool to see in person. I was one of the like last 5 to be able to walk through there because I went at the end of the night,
Mm.
and it was so cool. So if you can get tickets to Oogie Boogie Bash out there, I
Yeah.
highly recommend you go and check it out. But you will be at Mickey's Not So Scary,
Mhm.
which is a lot of fun. Hopefully, it rained on me the first time I went because it's Florida,
Uh-huh.
and we start Halloween in August. So hopefully September treats you a little bit better.
Yeah.
Before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say, to say to the folks out there?
I just want to say thanks everybody for all the support that I get, all the messages and things like that people send me, and for going to see all these movies and keeping them alive. I really appreciate it, and hope to see a lot of you on social media and connect with some new friends. So definitely let me know.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. And thank
My
you all for watching wherever you are, home, bus, train, plane, wherever you are watching this. Thank you so much. If you haven't already hit that subscribe button, please do so. But most importantly, tell your friends. Steve, again, thank you so much. And we will see you all next week.
Thanks everybody. Thank you, Milo.